So My Hero Academia's second half is just starting up, and to follow up a super hype tournament arc, we're getting a training arc for the ages, led by this dude. Now I'm sure you've seen a fair bit of him already, so I figured why not give you guys a little rundown on who this old man is. I'll also be going over the second half trailer more towards the end, so keep watching for that too. So his name is Gran Torino, and in order to understand who he is a little better, let's start with his past. And don't worry, there won't be any major spoilers in this. So what you already know was that Gran Torino was All Might's mentor, but what you don't know was how he became that. So without delving too deep into the manga territory, Gran Torino was a friend of All Might's predecessor, and Gran Torino had made a promise to that person to be the one to train All Might. So in order to do so, he became a teacher at UA just like All Might is right now. While in his prime, Gran Torino would have these intense practical training sessions with All Might, which if you haven't noticed by now had left a pretty heavy impact on All Might's impression of him. I'm sure you could tell how intimidated All Might was when he was just talking about him. But it's completely beyond me how Gran Torino went from this to this. I also wouldn't be too surprised if the artists were inspired to base this character off of Clint Eastwood. I mean, he looks like a comic book version of him, and he's named after the Gran Torino movie that Clint Eastwood directed in 2008. Even the premise of the movie is pretty similar to this art, but maybe that's just a coincidence, but I highly doubt that. Anyway, before he became a teacher at UA, he was also a pro hero. And as of now, other than being a short old man that likes to put up a senile facade, he has agreed to train Deku so that he could become more acquainted with his quirk. But what made Gran Torino qualified to train not one, but two possessors of One for All? Well, since he was a close friend of All Might's predecessor, he has had a lot of experience fighting alongside that quirk. I'm sure that he's familiar with every aspect of One for All, including its potential and its limitations. Now, what about his quirk? Well, he has this emitter type called Jet, and what this does is it allows him to shoot air from his propulsion boosters at the bottom of his feet. It's sort of similar to the way that Engine works, but a little bit more complex and a lot more useful. The full extent of his quirk isn't quite known yet, but it goes something like this. The air that he propels gives him the ability to jump and move at great speeds. But just like every other quirk in this show, it has a natural limitation, and that is that he can only use the air that he breathes to propel himself. So imagine it this way, the air that Gran Torino breathes is like a fuel supply that he can then use to propel himself in different ways. I know what you're thinking, oh, he can only use his quirk to make himself go fast, but that's not quite right. Gran Torino is an expert with his quirk, and he has figured out ways to use it to augment both his strength and his durability. So not only does he have the speed that is similar to or even faster than One for All's, he also delivers pretty strong blows while still being able to take a hit because of the way that he manipulates his quirk. So Jet, although a quirk that mainly boosts speed and agility, it also has its offensive and defensive capabilities. So there's your quick rundown on Gran Torino's character. Now let's take a look at the second half PV to see how things are looking for the next cour. So as I said before, this is the field training arc, so basically this involves everyone splitting up into different hero organizations to get some actual practice. It's also basically a big training arc for Deku. As you can tell within the first few seconds, he's just training to control One for All. But don't get all riled up because this arc isn't as boring as I'm making it sound. As you'll see in the preview, he learns a new move called Full Cowl, which you can basically tell is a controlled version of One for All throughout his body. And after he learns that move is when things start to pick up, like a lot. So then we get a couple clips from actual training between Gran Torino and Deku. And just as I said before, the way that he manipulates the air that he propels makes him faster than when Deku is using One for All. We then get to see a few shots of the League of Villains, but the real star of the arc is him, Stain the Hero Killer. Although my first impression of him is that he's not as intimidating here as he was in the manga, but maybe that'll change. And of course, Ida is going to try to get revenge, and to be honest, he looks more scary in this shot here than Stain does in the whole trailer. The next noticeable thing is that Gran Torino is using Jet to get a Nomu off a train. And this is an entirely different Nomu than the one that All Might fought in the first season. And then we get to see two more of them, so it's pretty obvious that they're using the Nomus to attack the city. As to why, you'll find out eventually. But expect some pretty good fights between the Nomus and the pro heroes. And finally, we get our first image of Deku's Full Cowl, followed by a couple scenes from the climax which I know you already know is going to be epic. And if they make these scenes as spectacular as they did with the fight between Todoroki and Midoriya, then we're definitely in for a treat. The trailer closes off with a few shots of everybody else in their own training, as if to show that their stories are somewhat important to this arc, but spoiler alert, they're really not. So yeah, that's pretty much it, a short little video on Gran Torino and what to expect from the second half of this season. If you're interested in more of My Hero Academia content, then check out my manga videos where I compare the scenes from the anime to the manga. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoy this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So until next time, ciao!